Welcome back to the official YouTube channel of the Indian Society of Toxicology. We have been regularly bringing you presentations and discussions, both case discussions and panel discussions on various aspects of medical toxicology. Today we will look at a unique aspect that has so far not been dealt with, and that is bioterrorism, utilizing a poisonous substance, something that the world needs to be concerned about in light of some recent developments. We will discuss this in the context of a case that happened not really recently, several decades ago, that first highlighted the power of a poison, and that a poison derived from a common plant, super toxic, which many people were not aware of. This case, which became a sensational case subsequently, served to highlight the importance of such toxins and what can be the implications when they fall into wrong hands. The power of super toxins is what we will be dealing with today, and the toxin I am referring to with regard to the case that happened in 1978 to be precise is Ricin. Actually, the correct pronunciation is Ricin, though it is commonly mispronounced Ricin. I am not very sure as to why that has happened, but we will stick to the correct pronunciation. So throughout the course of this presentation, I will be using that pronunciation. Ricin, super toxin, assassin's choice. We will discuss this particular super toxin, which surprisingly comes from a common plant, and that is Castor, botanical name Ricinus or Ricinus communis, a plant that grows wild all over the country and even abroad, does not require much by way of tending to it, though Castor is cultivated also for various reasons. We'll come to those. But first we will look at this case that brought this super toxin called Ricin to light for the first time. And this happened, as I said, in 1978, so long ago. And this particular case, which we will discuss, has gone into the annals of toxicological history. So we will discuss that, and then we will discuss the clinical features on exposure to Ricin, how you manage it medically, and what are the forensic or medico-legal aspects. We will look at the case first. The case is, of course, that of Georgi Markov. Some of you may have read about this or heard about it. Many of you may not have. But this case is one of the watersheds in the history of forensic toxicology. Happened in 1978, and it is also sometimes referred to as umbrella poisoning case. This case involved a person by name Georgi Markov, who was a Bulgarian writer, and he defected to the West because he did not like communist ideology. And as you are aware, Bulgaria was part of the communist bloc. He defected to the UK in the 1970s and then joined the BBC, British Broadcasting Corporation, as a broadcaster and mainly disseminating information against communism and communist ideologies. Naturally, this did not go down well with his own country, Bulgaria, and also the rest of the countries which were part of the communist bloc, especially the Soviet Union. So perhaps it was decided to eliminate him. We are not very sure about some of the facts that happened. A little bit of it's speculation, but scientific speculation, and some of it is of course based on facts. On 7th September 1978, as Georgi Markov was waiting at the bus stop near Waterloo Bridge in London, he felt a sharp sensation on his thigh, and when he looked around, he found a man with an umbrella, folded umbrella actually, and it appeared as if the point of the umbrella had penetrated his thigh. The man apologized and said that it was an accident, and then he quickly moved away, and Markov noticed that he was not going to wait for the bus. He walked for some distance and then hailed a taxi cab and disappeared. Markov was very perturbed because he was under threat for some time for his activities, and he felt that this incident was somehow an attempt to harm him or maybe even kill him. But he still went to his office and tried to pursue his work. However, he felt sick and subsequently had to be shifted to the hospital. At the hospital, he mentioned to the attending physicians about the incident that happened at the bus stop, and he was treated quite aggressively for his manifestations, which mainly comprised fever with gastroenteritis and then later on renal damage. Unfortunately, he died a few days after the incident. And because he mentioned about the event that happened at the bus stop, special care was taken during the autopsy that was performed to dissect that part of the thigh where he had pointed, was where the umbrella tip had penetrated. To the shock of the autopsy surgeon, he found that there was indeed something in that region, and he dissected it out. It was a tiny pellet made of platinum. You can see it on this image. This is a very much enlarged image. The actual pellet was just about 1 to 2 millimeter in diameter, and into this pellet some holes were bored. You can imagine the degree of sophistication involved. And though the pellet was subjected to chemical analysis and did not conclusively reveal the presence of any toxin, by the symptoms that Markov suffered and other factors that were taken into consideration, it was scientifically speculated that it must have been ricin which was present inside this pellet. The man with the umbrella was never caught. Officially, this case is still open, but unofficially, it has been closed as an assassination of this man with the help of ricin. For the first time, the power of this toxin derived from this very innocuous kind of plant called Castor was highlighted to the world. And the world came to know of several other super toxins which were also present in other kinds of plants. We'll come to those later in later sessions. So we are looking at today the power of ricin. In this image, you will see the original umbrella that is preserved in a museum. You can see as to how it has been engineered to deliver a tiny pellet filled with poison, most probably ricin, and that is how Georgi Markov was assassinated. If you look at the cross section in the form of a diagram, you will see as to how the whole thing has been engineered in the form of a device for firing a pellet into somebody's body. Though Superficially, it looks like an umbrella. Actually, it's a firing device. You can see the trigger. You can see a wound up spring with a release catch. There's also a gas cylinder, and there is the poison pellet, and the barrel is of course the umbrella tip. By pressing the trigger, you can cause the pellet to be released with considerable force from the point of the umbrella, and that is what happened in this particular case. Very fascinating case, but very disturbing case, because it opened up a new chapter in toxicology called bioterrorism, where people can be assassinated, sometimes even homicides or genocides can be perpetrated with the help of very powerful chemicals and toxins. So we are looking at one of those today. Castor, also called mole bean or moi bean or Palma Christi. It's a large shrub with greenish red leaves, borne on long green stalks, and the leaves may be very large, up to 1 meter across. I'm sure most of you have seen this plant. As I said, it's so common. Fruits are borne in clusters and have soft spines on the surface. Not really very hard or sharp, and not likely to cause any penetration of the skin. They are soft spines. And inside these fruits you have 2 to 3 mottled, glossy grey or brown seeds, 1 to 2 centimeters in length. You can see from these images the plant, you can see the very large kinds of leaves, and you can see the cluster of fruits, and inside those spiny fruits you have these very attractive looking seeds called castor seeds, mottled, brownish, sometimes greyish. Active principles: the seed is the most toxic part of the plant and yields a pale yellow oil, that is castor oil, which has got several kinds of uses. We'll come to that. And this particular oil has a faint odor and acrid taste. It contains the active principle ricinoleic acid, which is not very toxic. But the press cake of the seed that is left behind after extraction of the oil contains a very powerful toxin indeed, which is a toxalbumin or a toxic protein by name ricin. It is super toxic because it can act in just a few milligram doses to kill a person. As you can see here, fatal dose just 1 milligram per kg of ricin for an adult, or approximately 50 to 100 milligrams can kill an adult, and much less can kill a child. Or if 5 to 10 seeds are chewed and swallowed, or crushed and the extract is swallowed, that can also kill. It is as powerful as that. Many people don't realize. With regard to castor oil, not all that toxic, as I have said, and it has uses like it has been used as a purgative, industrial lubricant, and still being used for these purposes. Whereas ricin, the active principle that is present in the seed or the press cake, has been used as anti-tumor and immunosuppressive agent, but it is to be very clearly understood that it is extremely toxic, and it is an ideal kind of chemical, or I would say biological warfare agent. With regard to exposure on ingestion of the extract, or injection of the extract, or the seeds, if they are chewed and swallowed, if they are swallowed without being chewed, not much of a problem. Otherwise, these are the features you will see subsequently: vomiting, diarrhea with abdominal pain. Diarrhea can be blood stained, and diarrhea itself can be quite severe, leading to dehydration, hypotension, and later on there is hemolysis, breakdown of RBC with renal failure, and that is the cause of death in many a case. The gastritis itself is usually hemorrhagic, and the vomitus also can contain traces of blood. In some cases, there can be delayed central nervous system toxicity, including optic nerve damage. Case reports are there, and liver damage can also occur in high doses. But the most important features to remember are the bloody kind of gastroenteritis comprising vomiting, diarrhea, abdominal pain with dehydration, followed by hemolysis and renal failure. These are the important aspects with regard to clinical manifestations on exposure to castor extract or ricin. As you will see from this particular slide, management consists mainly of decontamination and supportive and symptomatic measures. There is no real antidote. You can try stomach wash, activated charcoal, etc. if the patient is seen early and if the mode of intake or exposure was ingestion. It will not, of course, work for injected cases. And subsequently, when there are manifestations that the patient is experiencing, you'll have to correct fluid and electrolyte imbalance. You'll have to monitor for hemolysis, complications of hypovolemia, sometimes even hypoglycemia. And there are indications that alkalinization of urine may have a role in preventing crystallization of hemoglobin, which can cause renal damage. And in severe poisoning, there are some toxicologists who recommend this alkalinization of urine, though I'm not very sure as to how effective it really is. Hemodialysis can also be attempted in cases of renal failure. But essentially, if you look at the management, there is nothing really specific. Much of it is just supportive measures. And if a substantial amount of the toxin has entered the body, usually death results. As in the case of Georgi Markov, death is many a time due to renal failure. So you will have to look at during autopsy, specifically for instance, for gastrointestinal congestion and erosions. I told you there is often hemorrhagic gastritis. And of course, because kidneys are mainly affected, there can be severely congested kidneys. And though you can preserve viscera and body fluids and submit them for chemical analysis, often it is difficult to detect presence of ricin. So even if the report says negative, please go by the history and the clinical pictures of patients who have succumbed to this kind of exposure to castor or the active principle that is ricin. You'll have to go by those aspects more than the toxicological report to arrive at the cause of death. If you're not very sure, you can state as to whether it is consistent or otherwise with castor or ricin poisoning. Forensic importance considerable in nature, as you would have understood by now. Do not forget accidental poisoning, which quite often happens. Some of these cases are due to therapeutic misadventure, because even today castor oil and sometimes even other parts of the castor plant may be used in folk medicine or alternative medicine for various purposes. And in the process, there can be overdose leading to severe ill effects, sometimes even death. We call this therapeutic misadventure. In allopathy, of course, castor or any of the active principles is not really recommended. And even castor oil, which was used in the past as a purgative, is no more recommended today because of the serious adverse effects. Another kind of accidental poisoning can happen when children forage in the countryside and come across this plant, and the fruit capsule appears to be quite intriguing to them with the soft spines and all that. It's possible they may break open the fruit and happen upon the seeds, which are also pretty attractive looking. I showed you an image, and a child may sometimes chew on these seeds out of curiosity, landing in severe problems. So there are cases of pediatric poisoning and even death, tragic instances. Suicidal poisoning, also not uncommon, especially in India, because this plant is so easily accessible. It grows wild, in fact, and also the plant is often cultivated for various purposes. But from the forensic point of view, the most important aspect is homicidal poisoning. I've already talked to you about the case that opened the lid to this particular poison, and that is a Georgi Markov case, as to how it was effectively carried out, and subsequently it has come to be known that toxins like these can be very effective bioterrorism agents. In the United States, there has been considerable interest. Even before the Georgi Markov case, the United States was actually investigating ricin for military potential during World War I. At that time, it was being considered for use either as a toxic dust or as a coating for bullets and shrapnel. But before the United States could weaponize ricin, the World War ended, World War I that is. Interest again got generated during World War II, and this time, along with Canada, United States undertook studies in detail with regard to ricin and its use in what we refer to as cluster bombs. There were plans for mass production, and there were even several field trials that were conducted. But by the end of all this, the conclusion was that it did not really make much economical sense using ricin when you had access to very toxic gases like phosgene, which was used during World War II. But interest continued even after World War II, though when the US Army Chemical Corps happened upon sarin and weaponized that, interest with regard to ricin subsided. We will talk about sarin later. One of the most terrible chemical weapons that can be used for terrorism. It has been used in some instances. Sarin, if I may mention right now itself, is a very powerful organophosphorus nerve agent, and it is perhaps among the most powerful. Even antidotes that are used against these compounds conventionally, like atropine and auxins and all that, may not work very well. We'll come to that aspect later in another session. With regard to ricin, while the US may have lost interest after the Second World War, the Soviet Union continued with studies and weaponized ricin successfully, and as we have seen, used it in assassinations, especially the Georgi Markov case. What is not known is that before Georgi Markov was successfully assassinated, there was another attempt at attacking another Bulgarian defector, and that is Vladimir Kostov. This was just about 10 days before the attack on Georgi Markov. But this particular case, where Kostov was attacked while he was on an escalator in the Paris metro, this particular case did not succeed. He felt a sting in his lower back, he developed fever, he went to the hospital, and he recovered. He did not die. People did not realize really what happened, but only when Markov died, it was understood that Kostov was also an attempted kind of assassination case. And his back was then re-examined and a ricin-laced pellet was recovered. So Vladimir Kostov's case is also important, as also Georgi Markov. The only difference being that in one case, that is Kostov's case, there was recovery, fortunately, whereas in the case of Markov, it ended in tragedy. Recently as 2013, 29 May to be precise, 2 anonymous letters were sent in the US, one to the mayor of New York City and the other to the mayor of Washington. And whether you believe it or not, a letter containing ricin was also alleged to have been sent to the American president at that time, Barack Obama. And though nothing really happened and the crime was discovered in time, it was a close call. And subsequent investigation led to the arrest of this lady, Shannon Richardson, who was a small-time actress, mainly a TV actress. And she was the one who committed this crime. Strangely, she did not have the intention to really kill anybody in the presidential, setup, including President Barack Obama, even though she targeted him. And she had no intention perhaps even to seriously harm the New York City mayor. Her intention was to try and frame these attacks on her husband with whom she was having serious problems, and they were going for divorce. So it was a kind of a revenge, utilizing Ricin, and the target, though, was really the husband. She wanted to do it in a kind of indirect manner, hoping that nobody would suspect. But she was caught and she was interrogated. Subsequently, she pleaded guilty and she's now in prison. She's been sentenced to 18 years in prison, and maybe she will be released only 10 years from now. She may have undergone part of a sentence so far, but she is still in prison. That is one case that I would like to talk about. Many people do not know about it. And yes, another even more shocking case is something that happened just in September 2020, just about a month ago. A letter was received by the presidential office. As you all know, Donald Trump is the president, and the letter was addressed to him. As in the case of all the other letters addressed to the president, he never really opens. So it was opened by somebody else in the team, and they found that this strange powder in the letter, and that was analyzed and found to contain ricin. And investigation was carried out immediately, because it is again an attempt to assassinate the president of the US, which is an extremely serious offense. And the investigations led to this woman by name Pascal Ferrier, a Canadian citizen, not really a US citizen, but she had an extended family in the US, especially in the state of Texas. And she was not at all happy with the way Donald Trump was doing things as a president, and she felt that she had to do something about it, and committed this grievous kind of act. Subsequently, investigations revealed that she is having some psychological problems, and right now the case is still under investigation, and we will know about what happens subsequently to this woman, who has virtually confessed to the fact that she tried to assassinate Donald Trump. So these cases will serve to illustrate what I'm telling you about ricin, about Castor. Plants like these containing super toxins are extremely dangerous and of real concern because of their potential use in bioterrorism, in assassination, in homicide, etc. We will talk about the other super toxins subsequently, but for now, that is all from me and the Indian Society of Toxicology. This particular presentation was the effort of Dr. Roshni, and she is the one who prepared all the slides and all the background material. I am just doing the voiceover for her. So it is goodbye from Dr. Roshni, from me and the Indian Society of Toxicology. We will meet again in some other session in future. Do continue to watch out for videos and presentations like these. Subscribe to the channel and click on the bell icon to get notifications whenever we upload useful and entertaining material like this. Till then, goodbye and best wishes.